Hello, I'm Geeta Gurumuthy. This is the Iran War Today, bringing you up to date with all you need to know on the US-Israel war with Iran. Let's start with some of today's key developments. President Trump vows tougher economic measures on Iran, as well as any country that helps or does business with it. Iran's foreign minister says President Trump's threat is a diversion from America's own economic problems. A tanker travelling off the coast of Yemen has been seized and diverted to Somalia. It coincides with Iran's threats to get its Houthi allies to block shipping in the Red Sea. And Iran's Revolutionary Guard say the country will deploy more destructive weapons if war resumes. First, President Trump says he will launch new economic measures against Iran and any country helping or doing business with it. In a post on Truth Social, he said, "I'm announcing the most crushing economic operation ever taken against any country," adding, "I'm also announcing that any country that allows its financial institutions, businesses, airports or government entities to provide any type of lifeline to Iran will itself face tremendous economic consequences." President Trump listed several activities that he said need to stop immediately, including oil smuggling, cash transfers and front companies. But Mr. Trump gave no further details and did not name any other country. At an earlier White House event, he did talk about possible new sanctions on Iran.
Well, we have things that we could sanction. We have very draconian sanctions, and we'll see what happens. Right now, the strait is open. A lot of boats are coming through. People aren't reporting that, and that may slow down a little bit at some point. But right now, a lot of boats are coming through. The naval blockade has been extremely effective. Literally while it's up, and it's been for quite a while, except for a couple of little pauses where we opened it purposely with a deal, but the deal didn't terminate. The deal didn't turn out to be what they said. When they tell us one thing and they do another.
Well, Iran's foreign minister dismissed President Trump's new economic measures. Abbas Araghchi posted, "The so-called economic D-Day is a diversion from America's own crisis, unprecedented debt and surging interest costs. Doubling down on failed policies will only bring further defeat and enmity of Iranians." Whilst the foreign ministry accused the United States of economic terrorism and crimes against humanity after President Trump's threat to ramp up sanctions.
He's now trying this sort of middle course between a peace deal and a ramping up of military pressure. He's talking about increasing the economic pressure. Now, the danger there, of course, is A, will it work? And B, will it impose suffering on the Iranian people, but not actually increase pressure on the Iranian leadership? All of this, as you say, a far cry from his initial promise that the war, when it began in late February, was going to be over in 4 or 5 or 6 weeks. Here we are in mid-August, and it's still a conflict zone, certainly, even if it's not full-blown war in the way that we saw in the first weeks of the conflict.
Neil Stanage, White House columnist at The Hill there. Let's go live to Washington and our White House reporter, Bernd de Boosman. So, Bernd, just tell us more about the Trump threats on the economy. What more do we know?
Well, we still don't know the actual mechanics of what these new sanctions will look like. That's likely to be announced at a press conference this coming Monday. But earlier, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent essentially declared the strategy as one that either countries are with the U.S. in its campaign against Iran or against it. What that means in practice, one economic expert I've spoken to suggested it would be like widening the economic blast radius of sanctions by going after any company, any entity anywhere in the world, including in U.S. allies, that does any sort of business with Iran or that has any sort of exposure to Iran, but also relies on the U.S. dollar for their own economy. In practice, this could mean many of these targeted entities could be in U.S. allies. Turkey and Iraq have come up a number of times as suggestions, as well as China, which importantly continues to provide Iran that vital economic lifeline. But in any case, these sanctions, Iran has proven very adept at evading the sanctions that have so far been announced, including a very similar package of sanctions called Operation Economic Fury, which was announced at the beginning of the conflict. It remains to be seen how effective these could be.
And there have been obviously, sanctions existing, and you talked about the other countries that might be affected, and some of those are US allies.
And I think that is a challenge to the Trump administration, as it has to potentially sanction the economies of other U.S. allies, Turkey in particular, other countries that have otherwise been helpful in terms of pushing for negotiations. But the Trump administration clearly hopes that even the threat of these additional sanctions and any sort of economic blowback that these countries face would force compliance. Now, at the same time, Iran has found ways around the sanctions that have already been announced, shadow vessels, for example, new front companies that pop up as older ones are already sanctioned. So it's very much a game of catch-up. But between that and the blockade on Iranian ports, the Trump administration hopes that Iran will eventually come to the table of its own volition and that the U.S. won't have to return to armed conflict. Earlier, Scott Bessent said he thinks it's very unlikely the U.S. returns to any sort of large-scale combat operations and instead lets these economic sanctions take hold over time.
And on the waters, a new U.S. aircraft carrier has arrived in the region. What do we know about that?
Well, the new U.S. aircraft carrier, the George Washington, has arrived in the Central Command Area of Responsibility. We don't know where exactly, but that's the waters around the Middle East, essentially. It's there to relieve another vessel, the USS Abraham Lincoln, which has now been at sea for well over 250 days. There's been reports that the Trump administration has been forced to contend with of food shortages, of mental health issues faced by some of these sailors on what has essentially been a much longer deployment than anticipated. And that's something the Trump administration was kind of on the back foot, having to respond to those claims of the conditions on board that ship. So I think while they've shrugged off those reports of the plight of those sailors, and we don't know exactly when that'll return to the United States, those headlines have been very negative for the Trump campaign, which initially promised a really swift military victory. That's ring hollow for the families of the sailors that have now been at sea for 250 days.
Bernd de Boesman, thank you. Next, Iran had threatened to get its Yemen Houthi allies to block shipping in the Red Sea. Well, today, maritime security reports say a tanker travelling off the coast of Yemen has been seized by 6 armed men who've diverted it towards Somalia. The UK Maritime Trade Organisation says the vessel was travelling west in the Gulf of Aden when it was approached by an unauthorised boat and sent out a distress call. Barbara Plett-Usher, our correspondent in Nairobi, says it's not yet clear if the incident is linked to the Middle East conflict.
Reports say that this resurgence in piracy, which has basically been quiet for about a decade, is because the fishermen, the local fishermen, have been angered by foreign trawlers that are decimating the industry, and so they have taken to piracy. But there are some defense analysts who suspect that this is related to the wider issue of shipping in the Middle East. So Iran had threatened to activate its Houthi allies in Yemen to block shipping in the Red Sea. The Red Sea flows through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait into the Gulf of Aden, where this ship was taken. And so some defense analysts think maybe the Houthi rebels in Yemen are coordinating with the pirates to disrupt shipping. We can't say that for sure, of course, but there has been a resurgence in Somali piracy, and it's coming at a time when there are a lot of stresses and pressures on shipping because of the U.S. naval blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, and because the Iranians have also been blocking shipping there.
Barbara Plett-Usher. The US military says it is continuing to enforce the American blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. US Central Command posted that as of Wednesday, US forces had redirected 65 commercial vessels, disabled 3 and boarded 2 to ensure compliance. The latest shipping data says that shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz on Wednesday was unchanged from the day before. The tracking data from Kepler says that what it called commodity vessel transits totaled 9. Some vessels may be sailing through the waterway with their transponders turned off, which won't show on the data. Well, President Trump addressed the issue of the Strait of Hormuz at his White House event.
The blockade has been 100% successful. No boats have gotten into Iran, but they are getting in for other places. But we'll see. We're going to see what happens. It'll either be extremely good and oil prices are going to drop like a rock, or we'll continue to do exactly what we're doing. You know, they were talking about $350 a barrel, and it's today $84, $85. And we are getting a lot of oil out. But the other thing that's happened is people have found other alternatives, which they never thought about. Texas, Alaska, Louisiana. and other places. In addition, a lot of pipelines, record numbers of pipelines are being built. So I think the Hormuz Strait's not going to be quite as important as it was in the past.
Qatar's Prime Minister said that the maritime routes should not be held hostage to what he called political blackmail. He made the remarks during talks with Egypt's foreign minister in the Mediterranean city of Al Alamein. Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani said that the freedom of navigation must be guaranteed and that Qatar was working with its Gulf partners to find a diplomatic path with Iran. Suresh Negadari from BBC Monitoring has more on the traffic in the Strait.
On the Strait of Hormuz, the situation is pretty much the same, if not worse. Very small number of ships sailing through the Strait of Hormuz, and both sides claiming that they control the strategic waterway. But this is not going to help global shipping, because no matter whether Iran is blocking the ships and stopping the ships from sailing through it, or the U.S. There is very limited transit, and the economic pressure is on all the countries in the region and some other countries in Asia and elsewhere.
Next, Iran's Revolutionary Guard say that they will use more destructive weapons if another round of conflict breaks out. Speaking on Iranian state TV, an IRGC spokesperson said that they are producing weapons that are more accurate, more destructive and more technological. With me is BBC Persian special correspondent Khosrow Naji. Khosrow, thanks for being with us. Tell us more about what the IRGC is saying.
Well, as you just said, they are threatening to use better and more accurate missiles. But, you know, you have to read into that a lot of bluster too. But it shows also that they are concerned. They are worried that there's going to be more fighting, and they're trying to sort of avoid that if they can. And at the same time, I get the impression that they feel that they're losing the initiative. Initiative is important. In the last of the war, in the 40-day war, as they call it, Iran maintained some kind of initiative. They were the ones that were driving the scene. But now it seems the Americans are doing this by blockading Iran on one hand, and they are about to impose pretty sort of hard sanctions against Iran too at the same time. So all these things are happening, and Iran has no say in this, and that doesn't look good for the leadership in Tehran. I think they're probably sitting around thinking about what to do to take the initiative.
Has there been reaction from Iran to the economic moves that Trump is talking about?
Yes, we had the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi tweeting today, calling these new sanctions that the US is about to impose as economic terrorism. And he said that this will have the effect of turning Iranians even more against the US. But obviously, when the sanctions do get imposed and start, it's going to make life difficult for Iran. Although Iran has been under sanctions for decades and has learned to be resilient, and the economy is up and running up to a point. Although we have inflation at 65% according to official figures, and so on and so forth. But obviously it's worrying. Under blockade, a naval blockade is going to have even more impact on Iran. There are hardly anything left to be sanctioned, but I guess there are ways of tightening the screw on Iran in terms of stopping back and forth of money into the country one way or another, smuggled or through exchange houses and that kind of thing. And that is going to be, if that is put a stop to, then Iran is going to feel it, and is going to, make shortages even more noticeable, inflation through the roof, and so on and so forth.
I mean, there have been reports, for example, that medicine prices have increased by more than 600%. Just tell us more about life inside Iran at the moment.
Yes, that shows. In fact, medicine is quite, something is basic, basically. I get the impression that, people are saving on the medicine in the sense that if you're supposed to take a pill every 8 hours, people tend to take 12 hours to take the pill, or, take one pill a day kind of thing to save money on that. And of course, the medicine in Iran is either imported or produced in Iran through imported raw material. Both of them need cash. Iran is short of cash after these decades of sanctions. So that in itself is a problem. And at the same time, the naval blockade means that ships are not coming in. So, no imports.
Kasra Naji, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for being with us there, BBC Persian special correspondent. Well, whether you're joining us on YouTube, TikTok, Sounds, radio or TV, thank you for your time. We'll be back soon with another Iran War Today.